Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Land Bodybuilding Mountain. And today I'm going to tell you the top 5 chest building exercises for natural bodybuilders. Now, one thing you should know is that this list might be different for you because I'm all about individuals and what works for them, right? So don't get mad or triggered if these aren't your favorite exercises. But these are the ones that I find to give the best bang for the buck for the effort involved. So those of you who have been on this channel for a while know my first and foremost exercise that I'm going to say right away is the bench press. Now, I know a lot of people out there say, oh, chest, doesn't get worked properly with the bench. It's better to do dumbbells and so forth. But I'm going to say the barbell bench press does activate the chest quite a bit, because a lot of times when you are using dumbbells, and I will get into dumbbells after this, but when you are using dumbbells, there's all sorts of different types of muscles that come into play for stability, and it's not necessarily the chest. One thing I learned the hard way was that when I injured a bicep a long time ago, I noticed that the bicep was used heavily for stability of the arms, to prevent them from straightening and so forth when you are doing dumbbell bench presses. So there's a reason why a lot of top bodybuilders have used the barbell bench. As much as many of them have dropped it over the years, there are a lot of them that still use it and still continue to use it as their primary chest building exercise. So I'm going to say the first one is the barbell bench press, because there are lots of variations in which you can use this movement. You can do wider grip, you can do narrower grip, you can find which arc or which motion seems to be the best, whether it's more of a flared technique or less of a flared technique in order to hit your chest properly. But regardless of which technique that you land on, the barbell bench press is one of those foundational chest building movements that I have stuck to for quite a long time. Now, the second movement is the one that you would guess. It is the dumbbell bench, right? The dumbbell flat bench. I find the dumbbell flat bench, as much as it may look similar to the barbell bench, there is a lot of subtle differences that happen throughout the range of motion on the dumbbells. So not only can you have the hands move closer to the center line and then wider again in order to get that pec building sort of movement or a little bit more tension on the squeeze aspect of the chest, you also can move the elbows into positioning in a much more freer way. So if you do have shoulder issues from the barbell bench, the dumbbell does allow you a little bit more freedom of movement, so that way the shoulders can move independently of each other. So that way you're not locked into some sort of range that is good for one side and not necessarily good for the other. I know it seems like there might be some sort of imbalances that go on that way, but the truth is that some people do not do well when they're locked into just the bar aspect of bench pressing, and they do much better with the dumbbells. And dumbbell bench presses do offer a lot of tension on the pecs. You do get some front delt involvement and some arm involvement, but at the same time, they are great for chest development. So the flat dumbbell bench is number 2 on my list. Now, the third movement on my list is the incline dumbbell press. The incline dumbbell press is great because of the freedom of movement with the elbows. You can lock yourself in, so that way you're getting more pec activation. Now, it doesn't mean that the barbell is bad, but I do find that I get a little bit more front delt involvement when I'm doing barbell inclines. I still will do them from time to time, but dumbbells seem to have a little bit of an advantage when it comes down to accessing the upper chest fibers, right? So if you're looking to get upper chest development, I would recommend trying, at least if you haven't so far, the incline dumbbell press. Now, usually I use about a 30-degree angle. You might need to use a steeper angle or a shallower angle. It's worth experimenting with, but I found that the incline dumbbell press is one of the top movements for upper chest, and it's great. Now, I know that a lot of people will use machines, and sometimes you can get some really great muscular involvement through using machines. So if you want to use an incline press on a Smith machine and so forth, you feel free to experiment. But my favorite that I keep on coming back to and that I always land back on is the incline dumbbell press. Now, number 4 on my list, and this is going to be one that is more of an individual choice based on my own individual situation, and that is the Incline Hybrid Fly. Now, I know a lot of people, they do a lot of flies on a flat and so forth, but I find because of the way I'm built and injury history and so forth, I find that the flat fly is not quite as effective for me for developing chest. I find that my shoulder comes in way too much regardless of how I change the technique. But I do really like the Incline Hybrid Fly. So it's basically an in-between movement between a press and a fly. So my arms are bent, but I'm really concentrating on that arcing sort of motion. And from doing this, I notice a lot of mind muscle activation in the upper chest muscles. So one of the things that I would just stress to you is that this is not a heavy movement. This is a movement that you would do moderately lower weights with. So you're doing 20, 30, 40 reps with this type of movement. And I use it more at the end of my workout to stretch after I've already established a pump in that area. So therefore I get to apply the pump and stretch method. So this is a movement that I really enjoy. I've only started doing it again lately. I used to do it all the time, but this is one of the movements that I really enjoy, and I would highly recommend, if you're having trouble getting upper chest development, to try the hybrid incline fly. Now, number 5 on my list is one that I don't do a lot, funny enough, but I do it for periods of time. It has to do with the floor of my garage. It's not always the most pleasant floor to lay down on, because I'm always pulling my car in and out and my cat's litter box is in there and so forth. So I have to go through a little bit of an effort to set it up. But the floor press is remarkably good for developing chest because of this. Now, before you go into a rant about range of motion and all this sort of thing and stretch and whatever, sometimes when you take the front delt out of a movement, just a little bit, right, you can access more chest development. So what I've found is that with the floor press, when you're lowering the weight and the elbows touch the floor, your delts are getting a mini rest, and therefore when you activate the chest again, I am at least able to get more of a constant tension pump in the chest because the shoulder is pushed into a different position because of the triceps touching the floor and the elbows and so forth. I find that sometimes going down lower is not effective in some movements for hitting certain muscle groups. And if you're one of these people, the floor press may help you access more chest gains because you're coming down and you're not necessarily getting this last little bit of rotation around the shoulder, and therefore you're just locked in this pressing motion, but you're not coming down so that the delts get super stretched in the process. Now, I understand that some of you might say, well, the chest isn't getting stretched either, but the chest is getting stretched. It just isn't getting ultimately stretched. But the point is, for some people, the chest can come into play to hit failure more so than the delts, and that's the most important part. Which muscle is hitting failure, and that's what's going to dictate what muscle adapts. So you may find that you get some extra tricep as well, depending on how narrow your grip is and so forth. But if you are having trouble accessing the chest, try floor presses. I know they seem counterintuitive, but they are very effective in the right situation for the right person. And this is one of my top 5 chest building movements. Mountain. So I hope this helps you out in your training. Thanks a lot for watching. If you want to tune into a podcast every week on these types of subjects and more, make sure you go to the link in the description on my Patreon page, and that'll take you to Natural Gallant Bodybuilding on Patreon. And thanks a lot to the Patreon supporters, by the way. And if you need to get hold of me, just go to naturalgallantbodybuilding.com and take care for now. Natural Gallant.